Hi, welcome back again, and welcome to turn 1. You'll notice that I'm not wearing my sinister dressing gown. That's because I'd like to keep that to when we're playing, when I'm playing the evil wizard. What I'd like to do first up today is just address some confusions that I've probably introduced in my rules explanations, and talk about some grey areas that will no doubt crop up during the game. Alright, so the first thing I'd like to talk about is my video quality and editing skills. I know that there's been some comments about the focus that I had on some of the cards that I illustrated in the last video. I'd like to apologise. This is, like I say, the first time I've tried this, so what I will do is, in future, is I'm just going to have a photo still of any cards that I'd like to draw your attention to, and we'll just have that on the whole screen in focus for a couple of moments, just so you can see what I'm talking about instead of me pulling cards in and out of frame. I think that'll work a little bit better. I'd also like to apologise for my editing in the last video. I've made it very tight, just simply so I could get through the rules explanation as quickly as possible and not have it blow out to a 25-minute video. But I know I've cut off some of my words in some points. That's not going to happen again. I'm going to try and keep the pace less frenetic and make it a little bit easier to watch, I suppose. I'd now like to go through some rules errata that I've introduced in my explanations of the rules. The first one is mind points. Now, when I explained mind points, I said that they're not really used in the base game, and that's not quite the case. There is a spell that the characters have in the Water School of Spells called Sleep, and the card is as follows. Now, as you can see, this spell will put one monster or player to sleep. He may try to defend himself by rolling one die per mind point. If he rolls a shield, he is unaffected. Once asleep, he may not defend if attacked. He will awake if he rolls a 6 at the start of his turn, or if attacked. Now, to the best of my knowledge, this is the only thing in the base game that refers to mind points, but I have been wrong once already, so we'll stick with this is the only one for now. If something else crops up, well, then I'll errata that as well. Now, the next error that I'd like to address is spells, and particularly ranges of spells. When I showed you the board at the start of the last video, I said that certain spells have a range in a certain number of squares, and that's not true. If you can see another figure, you can cast a spell on it. If you're in the same room as that figure, you don't even have to be able to have a direct line of sight to them. You can just cast it on them if you're in the same room. Something else that I may have misled on, while it's not technically an error, what I did was I moved the dwarf when I was explaining about his trap removing ability. I moved him right up next to the pit trap for him to disarm the trap. Now, he doesn't actually have to do that. If he's in the same corridor or the same room as a trap, he can just disarm that trap. He doesn't have to be right next to it. Another thing that I'd like to address is searching, particularly searching for treasure. Now, once you've searched a room for treasure, you can't search that room again for treasure, right? I didn't say otherwise, but I just didn't make that clear when I made the point in the last video. So once you've searched a particular place for treasure, you can't find any more treasure there. It's exhausted. The other point I'd like to raise is there's a bit of ambiguity about whether you can search corridors for treasure or not. Now, I'll just read you what it says in the rulebook itself. Under searching, it says the following. When a player searches, he searches the whole room or passage in which he is standing. Players must tell the evil wizard player what they are looking for. They may either search for secret doors and traps or treasure. Now, it adds a little bit of ambiguity there by saying that when you search the whole room or passage, and that you may search for either secret doors and traps or treasure. So in that, it sort of gives the impression that you can search corridors for treasure. When you read the specific entry about treasure, though, it seems like that ambiguity goes away. If a character searches for treasure in the appropriate room, the evil wizard player should reveal what treasure is hidden there. If there is no specific treasure listed for that room, then the character player must take the top treasure card. Now, so it doesn't actually make any mention at all to corridors in that paragraph. So what I read that to mean that you cannot search corridors for treasure. Now, I'm open to argument on that point. I've always taken it to mean that. So in this game, we'll say that you can't search for treasure in corridors. Now, if I have enough uproar about that, then I'm more than willing to change that back. So we'll see what happens. If there's argument online, we'll change that. Well, I hope that's cleared up any problems that may have arose. If there is any more questions, please feel free to contact me about them. As you can see, I'm now back into my sinister robe, so I guess we'll crack on with turn 1. Okay, so I've corrected the issue at the end of the last video as well, whereby all the characters were standing on the staircase. They're now in their correct positions adjacent to the staircase, and the first player who'll be having his turn is Royce the Elf. The players have also selected their spells. So the elf has chosen earth spells, and the wizard has the other three, being fire, air and water. Royce's first move will be to move to the door, open the door. If he sees a monster in the corridor, he's going to move towards and engage that monster. If he doesn't, he's going to head to the north and then search for secret doors and traps. Having opened the door, Royce now sees another door in the room to the south and a rock fall blocking the passage to the south. Now he said in his email to me that he wants to head north, so he's going to go north and he'll be able to make it to the corner there. Now when he makes it to the corner, he's actually in a good position, because if there's no monsters in that northern passage, then he'll be able to search both passages as one search for secret doors and traps action. I didn't mention it earlier, but it is, you cannot actually search for secret doors and traps or treasure if there's a monster in the room or in the passageway with you. So he's going to move to the north and hope that there's no monsters around that corner. But unfortunately for Royce, there is actually an enemy in that corridor. So having turned the corner, he sees two doors, a skeleton. There's also a rock fall here, and you can't really see it, but behind that there is also another rock fall blocking the passage there. So having done his movement, he can't actually do any searching from where he is now, because there is an enemy in the corridor with him. Now he did make it quite clear that if there was an enemy he wanted to attack it. Unfortunately none of the spells that he has enable him to attack it from where he is now, so he's just going to have to miss out on the second action of his turn. Lothario will be the next character to move. Now there's been a bit of discussion about whether Lothario is actually a female or a male. I'm probably going to go with calling it a female, just simply because the player playing the dwarf is a female, so it'll make it a bit easier on my end. Now Lothario wanted to disarm any traps if any were found, and then move up and support the elf in his northward movement. There hasn't actually been any traps discovered as yet. So Lothario has now moved up in front of the elf, giving him some support against that skeleton. We'll see if the skeleton's going to advance on them or not on its next turn. Now again, Lothario doesn't have any ranged attacks, and cannot search for treasure, traps or secret doors in the passageway that he's standing in due to the enemy there. So we'll move on to the next characters to have their turn, and it's Wilhelm the Barbarian. Wilhelm indicated that he'd like to search the current room that he's in for treasure before moving, and then he wants to head towards any doors that were in the south. So he's got exactly enough movement to be able to stop in front of the door in the south, open the door and look into the room, but first of all he's going to search for treasure. There is no specifically assigned treasure for this room, so what we'll now do is go to the treasure deck. Just so there's no indications of cheating, I'm going to shuffle on camera and draw the top card. Gold. You search and find small amounts of gold hidden in several places, but you lose track of time. Roll one die and multiply the result by 10 to see how many gold coins you find. Miss your next go. Record the money on the back of your character sheet. Okay, so I'll roll one die, and it is a 1. So the Barbarian has found 10 gold, which I'll record on his character sheet, and he misses his next turn. Now it says his next turn, so he'll be able to still take his move action and open the door, but then he'll miss his turn. Alright, so Wilhelm, very slightly richer, but missing his next turn, is going to move to the door at the south, open the door and see what's in the room. Having opened the door, he sees that in the room is a throne. Now the throne appears to be carved from a single piece of bone, a giant bone, and above it is a banner which reads, "The sun may turn in the sky, but I am eternal." So, who knows what that means? So that's all of the Barbarian's go, Wilhelm's go. Next will be the Wizard Barabell. Now for Barabell's go, he's going to move to the south to support the Barbarian, and he might as well, while he's in the passageway, search for secret doors and traps. Obviously there is no traps because they've pretty much walked the entire length of the hallway, but there may be, who knows, there may be a secret door. So he's going to move down next to the Barbarian, and then he's going to search for secret doors and traps. Now he does not share a corridor with an enemy, so he is fine to search this corridor. He searches for secret doors and traps, but unfortunately finds that there is none in this corridor. All the characters have now had their turns, so it's the evil wizard's turn. Finally I get to wreak my horribleness. Unfortunately, it's not going to be too horrible because I've only got one thing to be moving on the board at the moment. So the skeleton is going to move up its full allotment of movement, which is 6. Unfortunately, he can't get close enough to spill some of the dwarf's blood with his trusty scythe, but we will see what happens when he does get there in the next turn. And that brings us to the end of turn 1. Royce will kick off turn 2 once I have confirmation of what the characters want to do. So yeah, I'll see you for the start of turn 2. Thank you again for watching. Again, if there's any questions, comments or queries, just put them in the comments section under the video and I'll do my best to address them in the next turn. My name's Tinny and thank you for watching TORTUGA.